Dan, if I say Rural Cemetery, Brooklyn, and or the Battle of Brooklyn.
Well, it's got to be Greenwood on day long, but if I say back to you, Minerva.
Minerva, I do know what that is. I do know where she's located because I've been there.
She sees the other lady.
She does. It's quite a comparison.
I can't wait to get into this.
I can dig it.
This is the Can You Dig It podcast. We crawl into the crypts, gardens, and forgotten cemeteries. Join Dan Fuller, your resident cemetery chronicler, and Joe Shields, the plot-loving development exec, as we unearth the dark secrets of St. Louis and Bellefontaine, cemetery, and beyond. From garden geeks to history buffs with a taste for the macabre, as well as fans of iconography, this is your podcast. We love diving deep into the shadows of history. Let's dig in.
So I am here with my good friend and fellow employee from Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum, Mr. Joe Shields, who leads our charge in the development program. And I'm very proud to announce that Joe started, of course, with us as one of our wonderful volunteers and morphed into an employee. And so it's great to be able to work with somebody who has and shares the same passion I have for the beautiful 314 acres, which is Bellefontaine Cemetery.
And thank you, Dan. It is my pleasure to sit next to Dan Fuller, Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum, Cemetery Chronicler. It has been an amazing journey in my 3 years with the cemetery as a full-time staff member. And I've got to do many incredible projects for the cemetery, and I've got to travel for the cemetery. And speaking of, which is a great segue, I have got to travel to one of our sister cemeteries on the East Coast, and that is the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. In my first journey there, I was warmly welcomed by my counterpart, Lisa Alpert, and her staff. And Lisa was just the epitome of professionalism and just graciousness. She welcomed me with open arms, and she arranged a tour of the cemetery for me after I had met with the development staff. And on the way out the door, she goes, "Oh, hey, by the way, you're going to meet with Art Presson, our VP of Special Projects. And oh, he's a St. Louis guy." And I met with Art. He gave me an amazing tour. And again, just the epitome of professionalism and graciousness. And Art showed me around for every bit of 3.5 hours. And it is my pleasure to introduce Art Presson with us on the show today. He is our special guest.
All the way from New York.
Hi, Joe.
Yes.
Sitting in my home in Connecticut.
Oh, Connecticut. There we go. Even better. Love the Northeast.
So there's a handful of historic rural or garden cemeteries from the 19th century that were born out of the rural cemetery movement. And the Greenwood Cemetery is one of them. I'm going to take everybody back to 1838, 1839, 1840. Greenwood got its start, and just what an amazing institution. There's so many historical ties between us, between Bellefontaine and Greenwood, and Dan and I wanted to have Art on today to help bridge the stories, bridge commonalities between the two of us.
Oh, you mean like you stealing Elmer and Hotchkiss?
Well, yeah, I was gonna bring that in with the stretched umbilical cord of Elmer and Hotchkiss from Greenwood Cemetery to Bellefontaine Cemetery, but Joe got ahead of me just a little bit.
Yes.
So it's great that you're a St. Louis person so that we can kind of cut through all of it and get right to the chase. So where'd you go to high school at?
Rittner High School.
Rittner.
A class of 1,000.
Yeah, and go what?
Huskies.
Huskies, okay.
Rittner's in North St. Louis County, which is where I live. I'm an Old Town Florissant guy myself. It was so relaxing. And to meet Art, who was relaxed me right off the bat. He provided an incredible tour, just a wealth of knowledge. And he's a St. Louis guy. My first trip to the Big Apple, my first trip to Greenwood, it was overwhelming just because of the history and the landscape and just the prestige that it holds in the historic cemetery community.
Right. And the best thing is you don't have to explain things like gooey butter cake, pork steaks, and
steak and shake.
There you go. Steak and shake, velvet freeze, all of those things. We can talk the inside terms. So.
Or Forest Park, which is
where we are.
Which is where we are today. We're coming to you from the Visitor Center at Forest Park, and that's why the background might sound a little bit more noisier than usual, is because we're in a public spot, but in a historic setting.
Right. And unfortunately, and you may or may not know, May 16th, we experienced a tornado here in St. Louis, and our Forest Park lost somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 trees. And so it's a little sunnier today here than it was a couple of months ago. But as St. Louis does, it will endure and we will move forward. And in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll find out about some of those interesting connections we have with the Greenwood Cemetery in New York. So I'd love to hear Art tell us just a little bit about how he got connected with Greenwood.
Well, my first career out of college was as an exhibition producer, and then that kind of became ultimately an exhibition designer. I worked at the International Center of Photography. I'm a photographer, and so I was really drawn to the place, and it was a kind of a new place, exciting place in New York City. And Cornel Capa was the director, and brother Robert Capa, the famous war photographer. And so it was a new institution. It was really exciting to be there. I ended up being there for 18 years.
Wow.
And coincidentally, my career at Greenwood was also 18 years. So I don't know what it is about that number, but it seems to be after 18 years, I sort of lose interest. I don't know.
I was going to say, maybe your time clock just runs out.
Yeah, but when I came to Greenwood, actually because I was asked by our historian, Jeffrey I. Richman, who wrote the book called The Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery, New York's Buried Treasure. It was reissued in 2008. I think it was first issued in 1999. And I think that I would say that most of what I know about Greenwood, the mother lode came from Jeff. I've learned a lot from Rich Moylan, who's the president, and other people along the way. But I was transitioning out of exhibition design into garden design. And I went back to school and New York Botanic Garden in the Bronx and was studying there for a couple of years. And towards the end of that time, Jeff called me and asked me if I would like to design an exhibition based on his book. And I said, okay, of course. And so I actually read the book before I even stepped foot in the cemetery. Even though I had lived in Flatbush, probably about 3 miles from the cemetery, but it never felt like a welcoming place. It has this intense cast iron fence around it, 4.5 miles continuous fence around it, and it just didn't have that welcoming feel.
Right.
Well, that was kind of intentional, and that was one of the reasons when I was hired, it was Rich's idea that he really wanted a cultural institution. He wanted Greenwood to be welcoming, and he wanted to do projects and things that they hadn't done before. So exhibitions was one of the things that he wanted to do. So that I was studying landscape and had a background in exhibitions seemed ideal for him. And he said, well, when you finish your program, you come and see me. It took me a couple of years to actually do that after I graduated, but I finally did, and I was so glad that I did. And I had the opportunity to work freelance there for a few years doing just finite, garden projects. And ultimately, as things happen, the superintendent of grounds died unexpectedly and younger than me. So when I got home that night from work after I heard about this, and I said, oh my gosh, I don't have to find something else to do on Tuesday and Wednesdays now because whoever they bring in is not going to want any part of me. And much to my surprise, the next time I was in, Rich came out into the field, which he never has done, and offered me a job. And, I listened to him. I was very interested, and I tried to keep my cool. But I said to him, I don't really know anything about cemeteries. And he said, yeah, that's what I like about you.
There we go, that fresh approach. And so it's kind of, in a way, it's almost like you were one of the people who helped remove that 4.5 miles of fence and make it the cultural institution it is today. Yeah,
I definitely. I mean, he sometimes thinks I'm the first hire in that direction, but I remind him I think that Jeff was the first. But I was very pleased to be part of that transition. And now the place is just filthy with people that have that kind of feeling for the place and that kind of knowledge that can make it happen. And we have a curator of arts and events. I mean, what other cemetery has a curator?
Right. So just so people get a little bit of a feel, because we always love the numbers, can you give us the acres, number of trees, number of burials, and then some of the events that you guys do in the course of a year?
Yeah, so I'm a little shy on knowing the number of events, but like they're constant. 478 acres. It's at the highest elevation in Brooklyn, 250 feet above sea level at that point. It was formed by glacial moraine, the Wisconsin Glacier, which is, we're talking now, I don't know, a million years ago. And that's what formed the hilly environment. It was chosen because of that, because it really wasn't good for much else. It was really great for romantic views over the New York Harbor. And it had those hills which really lent themselves to nice curvy paths and roads. And it was just an ideal romantic setting. It was a collection of Dutch farms, but they were hard scrabble farms, I'm telling you. I don't know what you could have grown there because there was a lot of rock. And they ultimately were able to put together a 200-acre parcel as the original purchase and put together all these different farmers' lots. And then not very many years later, I'm thinking 30, 40, I'm guessing, but they finished off the property with a flat area, which was brought us up to 478 acres.
Wow. Do you have any idea of what kind of canopy as far as trees?
Well, we've done 2 tree surveys in my time period there, and they're about to get into another one, which basically the tree surveys rate the tree's value and safety and the type and the girth and the height. And so it gives us a percentage of what kind of tree coverage we have. And I think that, unfortunately, still our most common tree is the dreaded Norway maple. But we cut those down as fast as we can. And, and really the reason is that at about 80, 85 years old, we find that they start losing major branches. Right. And so anytime there's any reason to cut down a Norway maple, the guys are there. And we have a full-time arbor crew, which they're highly trained and in technique and safety. And they've done a great job over I would say that we've had this particular group for about 10 years.
Well, you guys sound like you have many connections to us. Your maples are pin oaks, I think, and we're in the process of thinning those out. I know when we come back, we'll get into some more of the connections that we have with Greenwood Cemetery and, of course, what I like to call the stretched umbilical cord and the man, Elmer and Hotchkiss.
I can dig it.
Got a dream, a passion, a product, a service, a brand you want the world to know about?
In a world of noise, you need a way to cut through. And today, the most powerful voices aren't the loudest. They're the most specific.
Niche podcasts are exploding, building loyal, engaged communities around every topic imaginable.
Listeners aren't just tuning in.
They're connecting,
trusting,
and buying.
You don't have to be a tech wizard or a radio pro to make it happen. We get it.
Your expertise is your passion, not production. That's where we come in. At Trevian Entertainment Group, we handle the heavy lifting. From recording and editing to getting your show on all the major platforms, we provide a turnkey solution. We're the award-winning producers behind some of the world's most successful niche podcasts.
We'll help you craft a show that sounds polished, professional, and powerful. This isn't just about starting a podcast.
It's about building an authority, creating a community, and turning your dream into a thriving business.
Don't let your voice stay silent. Go to TrevianStudios.com, TREVIAN.com, and start your podcasting journey today.
So here we are back again in the visitor center at Forest Park here in St. Louis. But through the modern aspect of technology, we get to talk with a friend of ours from Greenwood Cemetery, and he is a close friend of my good friend, Joe Shields.
Pleasure to again be with Dan Fuller, Cemetery Chronicler, Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum, and Art Presson, former head VP of Special Projects for the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. And I want to take our guest back about 3.5 years ago. Come on board as a full-time cemetery employee for Bellefontaine. And one of my first orders of business is to network, get out on the East Coast and meet my counterparts. So I go to Greenwood Cemetery, and the Uber drops me off right at the 25th Street exit or entrance, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm walking up a very long path to get to the main gates, which are just incredible. For those who have not seen it, please go at some point today and review Greenwood Cemetery online, because the main gates off of the 25th Street entrance are just a sight to behold.
They're Gothic revival architecture, and those were designed by Richard Upjohn, the architect, who actually has done 4 other buildings on the premises, including 2 other gatehouses, which are more modern, but still pretty spectacular. And then the founder, Henry Pierpont of the cemetery, the founder, his family lot, the center of the lot is a open air chapel, and these are all done in brownstone.
So for the listeners who have not been to Greenwood, it's just an amazing experience as you enter, because not only do you come through this just historic, amazing feature that is the main gates, the topography as soon as you go in the cemetery is quite challenging. It's hilly, which allows the guest to view this off to your left as soon as you come in. There's an amazing hillside with these mausoleums built into it. And Art, correct me if I'm wrong, but the first half of the cemetery has that challenging topography, and then because of the glacier that you mentioned in the previous section of the podcast, it goes flat because of the glacier, correct?
Exactly. That's exactly where the glacier ended. And then from that point forward, it's the outwash plain and just goes right out to the ocean. It's flat to Coney Island from there.
And ladies and gentlemen, when I mention challenging topography, I'm telling you what, as a tour guide at Bellefontaine, I think Dan and I have, and Dan's a tour guide as well, we have it pretty easy compared to the tour guides at Greenwood, because I would be channeling my birth weight if I had to give tours day in and day out of the first half of the cemetery. I mean, it's a climb.
Yeah. See, that's the good part about garden cemeteries is it's all that beautiful topography, those views and vistas, and it sounds like Greenwood has them in plenty as far as a downtown New York view.
Yeah, well, one of our tour guides has a saying that she says, if you see a hill at Greenwood, climb it. You'll find something worth to climb.
Well, Art, perfect segue. If you, over your 18 years, I know you've seen a ton of amazing experiences and events. What are maybe the top 3 or 4 experiences that you've had at Greenwood? That's just a wow factor for you.
Mm-hmm. There was burial of firemen, and they brought so much equipment out. And the service was in the chapel, and they basically took all the uniformed firefighters and they surrounded the oval on the driveway, and the fire trucks were in the background. But it was such an amazing sight. And I happened to be on the upper road looking at we have these wildflower meadows that surround the chapel. So I was up there looking at something in the wildflower meadow, and looking down on this was just like, oh my, it was very impressive. Just something like that. I know it's funny. It's hard for me to really pinpoint particular things, events. Of course, there was Hurricane Sandy. That was an event and a half. So we did not lose 3,000 trees, but we lost maybe about 250 trees. And I know what that looked like. That was a hell of a mess that took about a year to clean up. And it took us, we got grants from the state eventually to help us to replant. And it's just been tremendous. I mean, see, with us, we have so there's 8,000 trees. You think, okay, you lose a few hundred. You can lose a few hundred. I mean, the thing is there were probably 6 in those trees that were really heartbreakers.
Right.
And most of them were Norway maples. So I'm quietly thinking to myself, thank you, Lord. Thank you.
Yeah, we were talking about the maples versus the pin oaks there for a while. And again, this is, I keep hearing you talk about things that also have a connection to us. We have the Fireman's Fund lot at Bellefontaine Cemetery. We love and live for our trees. And so, yes, to lose one is very painful, but yet as stewards of these wonderful garden cemeteries, we also get to plant the next. And I know our horticulture team is constantly working on diversifying our canopy and catalog of trees.
Exactly.
I know Joe asked for 3, and I'm going to kind of ask for a little special thing on the last one. But when you finally were able to get through those gates that you felt like were such a barrier before, what was the emotion that you did finally connect with that made you understand that Greenwood was where you're going to spend your, as we identified, 18 years?
Well, like I said, I had read Jeff's book before I even walked in the gate. So I had a lot of information. And so when I came through that gate and I started driving through streets, it was like a wash of history, just sort of coming down on you, in the shade. You felt like immediately there was 10 degrees cooler. under the shade of trees. And these are old trees. I mean, these are, been around for a while. So that sort of did it for me in a way that I think that just kind of going in and out of light and into the shade and into the sun and around the bend and like those kind of hidden views as you drive through the circuit of paths, you never know what's going to come around the bend. And so there were always those kinds of surprises, which were great.
That's awesome. Now, we know that Almron was not the initial designer at Greenwood. He actually helped with the extension that was done some years later.
It's true.
Can you tell the difference between the original Greenwood and then what was an extension?
Well, yeah, you can. David Bates Douglas was the original designer who helped scout the site with Henry Pierpont and decided on this place would be a good spot for a cemetery. He was there for less than 3 years. I don't think he's getting paid very much. And Kenyon College stole him away. So it was sort of left to Almron to sort of develop the plans. I mean, because I don't think that David Bates Douglas did much more than create a plan, on paper, maybe some road digging and stuff like that. So in the hilly section, the roads typically would just follow the swale. And then the excess soil would just be thrown up on the banks, which was kind of became a neat feature of the cemetery, because when you got into an island and you looked out towards the vista, you didn't see the roads because they were down low.
Right.
And so it looked like a continuous sweep of land.
Right. We have that same feel. He lowers the roadways so that you go from green space to green space. Now, interestingly enough, and we're always finding our history here, we found an original plan that Almron Hotchkiss did for Bellefontaine Cemetery. Mm-hmm. And I can tell that he only had the outer boundaries, because what he drew is not what we are today. So very much what you are talking about is following the particular sways of the landmass, right, is what I think Almron might have learned there at Greenwood that he brought to us very well.
Yeah, but what I want from my couple of times I've been out there, and my first visit to Bellefontaine, I didn't bother to call or talk to anyone because it was 105 degrees that day. There was a heat advisory that told people to stay home. And my wife and my kids who were with me on vacation, they stayed in the hotel. And I said, but I'm here now.
You got to do it.
So I went out, and it felt like Greenwood in many ways, even the street signs. But what he did with the street signs, he made them very low, whereas like in Greenwood, they're black and with a white lettering. I think you've got white with a black lettering, and they're very low to the ground. And also the hills were very gentle.
Right.
Whereas ours are a little bit more
aggressive,
radical,
as Joe says.
Yeah, there's two hills in Bellefontaine that resemble the first half of Greenwood. Praise Alleluia.
Yeah, right. Well, one of my goals there was to make sure that whether you went up the hill or down the hill, that there was something interesting to see. And so when we put in the meadows around the historic chapel, I was really pleased, because that really gave a reason to go that direction, and it became a draw for people to go and see that.
And Art, speaking of historic, I want to tell our listeners the story of when you took me to go see the Statue of Liberty. So for our listeners, during my tour, for my first tour visiting Greenwood, Art was taking me around the property, and at one point we went to it wasn't too high of an elevation.
It was
climb at least. I mean, we didn't have to climb it.
You didn't have to climb.
Praise Alleluia, yeah. But when we got out of the car, Art was showing me around where composer Leonard Bernstein was right here, and there was a fabulous mausoleum behind us, and Art had me look at the Statue of Liberty, which was a few miles out, but you had a clear view of her. And he strategically positioned me on a spot. And he goes, oh, hey, by the way, you're standing exactly where George Washington stood when he fought the Battle of Brooklyn. And I was like, that's it. This is the epitome of historic right here.
Living and walking and standing on history.
Oh, yeah.
But more importantly is you were standing at the monument of Minerva, which is waving to the Statue of Liberty.
Hey, Art, could you tell our listeners about that? Because not too many people, I don't think, back on this end know about that.
Right. Well, so there's this allegoric figure, Minerva. She was pretty good size. I mean, I would say probably double life size. And the person who put it out there was a big Revolutionary War fan, and he wanted to honor the Revolutionary War, and so that's what he came up with. And they didn't originally have it sighted, but when they got to the point where they were going to sight it, they saw that potential, and so they went with it. And I'm so glad they did, because it really is such a perfect feature. You don't photograph it well, but you see it with your eye, and you really make the connection. And Higgins was the owner of the mausoleum and who made Minerva. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember Higgins ink, but it was like a bottle of India ink that you dipped the pen in. And that was how he made his money. And yeah, so that hill, as you were saying, this is where the Battle of Brooklyn took place. And let's say less a battle than a retreat, because they had the upper hand. They saw down to the soldiers were able to see down to the East River and just saw swarms of redcoats coming up. So they knew, let's get out of here. And they sort of took off north from there. But that was led by George Washington. And it's not talked about much because it was kind of a loser, in terms of our side.
Yeah, but how appropriate we talk about this as we get ready to go into 2026, when we're talking about the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country. So, thanks for that patriotic nod.
Absolutely. Hey, and Art, are you familiar with the Ludi statue, or the quote-unquote the girl in the glass box at Bellefontaine?
Yes. She fogs up.
She does. She does need...
Especially when it's 105.
She does. She does need some help there. So with all of the art that Rich Moylan in his career collected and curated, and I know you have art out in the cemetery itself, are there any similar, girl in the glass boxes?
I'm glad you brought that up. It was actually one of my last projects, and it's called Babes in the Wood. It's a Thomas Crawford sculpture. It's of marble, and so it's pretty delicate and it's susceptible to acid rain and the kinds of treacheries of the Northeast weather. So what I came up with was we were going to put it in a greenhouse. So I'd actually sort of looked at your situation, and I said, well, I don't want that. I'm sorry to say.
That's all right.
But let's see if we can find a way to preserve this thing without mucking it up. And so I was able to find a greenhouse, which was made in Kentucky, and then it still hasn't been assembled. I was there about a few weeks ago, and much to my chagrin, I saw that it had not been put together. So I'm going to start bugging them again about that. We want to be pushy, but I guess I'm going to have to be, because now Rich Moylan has resigned as well, as of
just a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
So your concept is the fact that you're actually going to build this structure around the statue, and then I'm sure put a nice little garden in there as well with the statuary.
We have talked about whether or not plants can go inside the greenhouse. It's a very small greenhouse, and so it's a good fit. But I do think that there is some space in there for some greenery, as long as it doesn't start to create a problem with humidity and stuff like that. So we have to keep watching that. But certainly on the outside, there's a space for that, although we don't want to interfere with the ability of people to walk right up to the greenhouse and put their nose in the glass and look at this really, really beautiful statue of two children. It's based on Grimm's fairy tale, and at first glance, they look like they're just sort of cuddled up and sleeping. But no, they're dead.
Okay.
The evil uncle had put them out to the forest on their own, and they died in each other's arms.
So I'm going to file that away for future reference. We have two young boys that are embraced while reading a book, and maybe one of these days we can do something similar to that at Bellefontaine Cemetery.
When I get it built, I'll let you know.
Okay. Well, I love this interaction because, again, there are those connections, even though we are many hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, but we have that shared commonality of, again, Almren and some of his design elements, and the fact that, again, we're part of this family of garden or rural cemeteries.
Mm-hmm. And I want to end the podcast today with just saying that, Art, we cannot thank you enough for being on today's episode. And it has been my distinct pleasure. And in my travels for the cemetery, I've been just multiple of these cemeteries on the East Coast, to have encountered Art and just his graciousness and your willingness to just open the doors, flung wide open. 3.5 hours is
a long tour, but it's not my longest.
It went by immediately.
That's when you know it's a good tour.
Absolutely. And Art, just thank you for joining us today, and just thank you for everything that you've done over the last 18 years to help guide Greenwood through a pivotal time in its history to get it where it's at today.
So this is definitely, I need to put this on the bucket list. I've been to New York and I made it over to Greenwood, but I got to get there with Art.
Yes.
Well, give me a call, and I'll meet you there.
Okay, and vice versa. Whenever you're back in St. Louis, so you got to come by.
It's not 105,
and it's not 105. Come in the fall.
Well, if the Cardinals are in the playoffs, maybe that's going to happen.
Heck
there
yeah.
we go.
All right, Art, thank you very much for joining us. Art, I hope you have a great rest of the day. And if you would like to check out the Greenwood Cemetery, please go to green-wood.com.
Put the hyphen between the green and the wood. That's the thing that distinguishes us from all the others that have taken our name.
And the website is going to tell you all about their tours and events and opportunities to get plugged in.
If you just go to Greenwood Cemetery, you'll get there.
Okay. The Greenwood Cemetery.
There we go.
Well,
Yes.
that's the 19th century formality. But mostly we can just say Greenwood or Greenwood Cemetery. I haven't got them yet to say Greenwood Cemetery on Arboretum, but it may happen still.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Art. We really appreciate your time. And, of course, invite you to come visit us at Bellefontaine.
I will. My pleasure.
I can dig that.
I can dig that all day long.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Also, please share this episode with your family and friends if you got value from the episode as well as the podcast. You can do it right from the platform you are listening on. Plus, take a screenshot and tag us and tag yourself. We are at Podcast Can You Dig It on Instagram. The Can You Dig It podcast is produced by Peace Off Productions and the Trevian Entertainment Group.